the second demo in this series where we are building a React Node.js web application using Cursor as the tool. And in the previous demo, we already built out the scaffolding. So we have all of the folder structures and the necessary modules to Node function and React on the front end function. And we have a very simple API setup where we can test the communication between the front end and the back end. And all that worked successfully by the end of demo one. So in this demo, we're going to actually create the first functional feature, and that's simply going to be capturing nodes. So what we're basically building is a tool that could be used internally in a company or just for you personally that lets you capture your ideas and continue to evolve on those. And eventually we'll integrate AI and all kinds of features to it. But starting, we're just going to get it where we can capture a basic note. And in this demo, these notes will not persist. They will not be stored anywhere permanently, but we will eventually add that as well. So let's just walk through this prompt. It is a massive prompt. You don't have to be this thorough, but the more thorough you can be, the better Cursor's AI agent will do at building the feature for you. So let's just talk through it, and then we'll simply copy and paste it over to Cursor and watch it do its job. So we see here in the text editor, I start off by basically telling it what we're doing. We are continuing to build a real internal tool for capturing and evolving ideas. I tell it what the project already has: React as a front end, Express as a back end, which is an added module to Node. We added that last time. A working API endpoint for health. And then, of course, the routing for all the API goes through a /API component. So it's basically whenever the web front end goes and talks to the back end, it will always be the main part of the web address /API/ the specific endpoint, add a note, whatever. The goal for this prompt is to add the first real feature, which is the notes system. We're going to keep it intentionally simple and clean, but of course, we can expand upon it. And I put in here just that is not a demo only feature. It needs to function and feel like a real app. That's probably not necessary, but with a lot of the stuff that I do, it sometimes picks up like I'm doing a demo. Now I'm separating it into back end and front end. So on the back end side, and I specify here, this is for the index.js file that's in the server folder. I just want to add an in-memory ideas store. Eventually, we'll make this into a permanent store. But for today's demo, we're going to create an array that's called ideas. Each idea looks like this object. This is a JSON object. And if you're not familiar with that, that's fine. You don't have to give it this information. Again, this is just being as specific as we possibly can. So what I basically do here, a JSON object is an object, a data object that exists inside of JavaScript and is used in lots of other spaces as well, but that was where it originated. So it sort of starts and ends with those curly brackets there. And then everything is a field name separated by a colon from its value. So ID colon, and then a string value that goes with that ID. And then text would be the field name, colon, and then we have a string that is the actual text or note. And then created at, colon, and this is ISO string because we're trying to keep it standardized, which ultimately will be a date timestamp. That's what it will come out to. Again, we could have worded this differently. We could have said created at, and then date time, something just to specify. Or you could have omitted that altogether, and Cursor's AI would have come up with the structure, but then you're totally dependent on what it chose to do instead of dictating. So again, when you think you have the idea and you're like, yep, I think I can sort of instruct it how I want this to look, then you can just put it in there. Also, we want to add these API routes. So we're going to add a get API ideas. So this is going to return all the ideas to the front end. And then we have a post API ideas. And this is basically where we are sending it new ideas to save or record. Here, I tell it that it needs to accept the JSON object of text, which will be the idea. It needs to validate that. So make sure it's not empty. Then it needs to create a new idea with, again, the ID, the text, and the created at. Push those ideas into the array, and then return that created idea to the front end. And then finally, we need to be able to delete ideas when we choose. And so that would be API/ideas/:ID. And what that basically means is that we would send it the ID, right? So it would be /API/ideas/ the actual ID, and that would be used to go find it in the array and delete it. Once again, don't necessarily have to explain all of that to it. So in the next section, we're looking at the front end, which I show is at client source API.jsx. We're going to replace the existing UI with our intended ideas UI. So the requirements here is that we have the page title and then a short subtitle. The behavior that we expect is a text input. We have an add idea button, and then once it submits, it posts. So that backend API clears the input and refreshes the list of ideas. In our ideas list, it has to be able to get the ideas from where the data is stored in the backend, display the newest first. Each idea is going to show the text and then a small timestamp. Each idea also has a delete button that calls the appropriate backend API and then updates the UI immediately. User interface notes, you'll see that we want to disable the add button when the input is empty, right? So you have to type something to add. We want to show a small loading or empty state when no idea exists, meaning we have no ideas in the database, or in this case in the array. And we want to keep the styling simple. So we're not using CSS, which is the styling framework that's used for the web. We'll add those later. We've set some quality items here. Right now, no extra libraries. Keep the code very readable and clear separation of the different sections. Minimal, but still serious error handling. And we're building this to be like a foundation we can build upon. And then, of course, at the end of all of it, we'll commit it to Git with the right kind of comment. And then finally, put back to me what we've done. So that's basically it. So again, at the end of this, it'll be functional. It won't store it permanently. We'll add that later, but we should be able to actually add, see, and delete all the ideas. So I'm just going to select this entire prompt and then come over here to cursor where we were before. Click in the agent, paste, and then press enter. So we can follow along. And notice this time, doesn't mean we won't, but right now we don't have any prompts where a cursor is asking us to click run. And that's because these files already exist and it is simply updating code within these files. So you can see that first box there is the index.js for the backend server part. The box below it is the app.jsx, doing some behind the scenes stuff. So it basically checked for errors. Granted, there could still be errors logically, for sure. And then this here where it's asking us to click run is where it's actually creating the git commit. So it's saving a version, if you will, the updated version of the code. And you can see that it modified 3 files, 280 insertions, and 42 deletions. So that just tells us within those 3 files, there are 280 new lines, and there are 42 lines that were previously there that were taken out. All right, so it gives us a summary of everything. And then you can see that it's already updated, of course, by using the way that we have set up React with Vite. It auto refreshes all of this, front end and back end. And so here we go. We have the ideas lab, capture and evolve ideas as they happen, what's in your mind. The idea button here is not clickable, no ideas yet. So what's our first idea? There we go. Create an internal notes web app. There you go. Added it right there. There we go. And our next idea is to record our, let's say, app development journey and add that idea. All right. So we did what we set out to do in this particular demo. We built on top of the scaffolding we created earlier. We made a initial foundational functional app feature, and then we can build upon this now, persist the back end, change the way it functions, different UX experiences, and then eventually add AI and maybe authenticate users and sharing and so on.